The day my life shattered wasn't some big, dramatic explosion. It was quiet, insidious, and it happened in our living room on a Tuesday afternoon. I was 17, practically vibrating with excitement because my acceptance letter to the state university, with a full-ride scholarship, had just arrived. I was going to be the first in my family to get a degree without drowning in debt. My future felt so bright, I almost needed sunglasses. Then my dad, Martin, walked in, his face a thundercloud. He held a crumpled envelope, the kind he used to keep his emergency cash. "Where's the money, Tiffany?" he demanded, his voice tight. I blinked. "What money, Dad?" "The $500 I had in here," he said, shaking the envelope. His eyes were already narrowed, fixed on me. Not on Andre, who was sprawled on the couch, scrolling on his phone, barely looking up. Andre was 21 then, older than me by 4 years, and always the golden boy, no matter what trouble he stirred up. "I don't know anything about any money," I said, my voice rising, a knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't a question. This was an accusation. Andre finally lifted his head, feigning concern. "What's going on, Dad?" Dad ignored him, his gaze still locked on me. "It's gone, and you're the only one who knew where I kept it." My heart started to pound. "No, I didn't. I swear." I looked at Andre, desperate for him to back me up, to say something. He just shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "I saw her near your desk this morning, Dad," Andre said, his voice soft, almost regretful. "When you were at work, I didn't think anything of it." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own brother. I stared at him, my mouth open, trying to form a coherent thought. "Andre, what are you talking about? I was in my room all morning studying." Dad's face hardened. "Tiffany, don't lie to me." "I'm not lying." Tears stung my eyes. "Why would I steal from you? I just got my scholarship. I don't need money." Andre sighed dramatically. "Maybe she needed it for something else, Dad. You know, for stuff." He made a vague gesture with his hand, implying anything from clothes to drugs, without actually saying it. He was always so good at planting seeds of doubt. Dad looked at Andre, then back at me. The trust in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, disappointed blankness. He always believed Andre. Always. Andre was charming, persuasive, and could talk his way out of anything. I was the quiet, studious one, the one who followed the rules. But in that moment, I was the thief. "Get out," Dad said, his voice flat. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What?" "Get out of my house. If you're going to steal from me, you're not living under my roof." "Dad, please. I didn't do it. Andre did it." "He has gambling debts. I heard him on the phone last week. He owes people money." The words tumbled out, desperate, accusing. Andre scoffed. "Gambling debts? Tiffany, seriously, you're just making things up now." He looked at Dad, a picture of wounded innocence. Dad didn't even hesitate. He didn't ask Andre a single question. He just looked at me, his face set. "Go, pack your things. You have an hour." My scholarship, my future, gone, just like that. Because my brother needed $500 to cover his gambling habit, and he didn't hesitate to throw me under the bus. I packed a small bag, my hands shaking, my vision blurred with tears. I walked out of that house, a house that had been my home my entire life, and no one stopped me. No one called after me. Andre didn't even look up from his phone. I was 17, and I was homeless, framed by my own brother, and disowned by my father. The full-ride scholarship, the one I'd worked my entire life for, was revoked because of the moral turpitude of stealing from my family. My dreams, shattered. What hurts most? That he never apologized, because he never had to. 7 years later, the sting of that Tuesday afternoon still lingered, a phantom ache in my chest. But it wasn't a wound that festered. It was a scar that hardened. I was 24 now, living in a decent two-bedroom condo in a city 2 states away, a city I'd chosen precisely because it was far from anything I'd ever known. I'd put myself through community college, then worked 2 jobs to save up, eventually starting my own small online business. It wasn't a Fortune 500 company, but it was mine, built from nothing but sheer grit and a burning desire to prove everyone wrong. My roommate and best friend, Mila Gomez, 23 and a whirlwind of chaotic energy, was sprawled on our couch, scrolling through TikTok, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard from anyone in my family since the day Dad kicked me out. Not a single text, call, or email. Nothing. I answered, my voice carefully neutral. Hello? Tiffany? Is that really you? The voice on the other end was soft, a little shaky. It was my Aunt Eloise. She was 45, my mom's younger sister, and always the quiet observer in our family, never one to stir the pot, but always kind to me. She was the one who, in the weeks after I left, had quietly sent me a few $100s, no questions asked, just a note saying, for books. Aunt Eloise, I said, a strange mix of surprise and apprehension washing over me. It's been a long time. Oh, honey, I know, she sighed, her voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. Pity? Guilt? I'm so sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to tell. My grip on the phone tightened. What's wrong? It's Andre, she said, and I braced myself. It was always Andre. He got himself into trouble again. Drugs. They arrested him for possession with intent to distribute. It's a serious charge this time, Tiffany. Not just a slap on the wrist. I felt a flicker of something, not quite satisfaction, but a cold sense of inevitability. Andre, the golden boy, always finding new ways to dig himself deeper. And what does that have to do with me, Aunt Eloise? Aunt Eloise hesitated. Well, your father, Martin, he needed money for bail. A lot of money. More than he had. And Andre's lawyer fees are astronomical. A chill ran down my spine. I knew where this was going. What did he do? He sold your car, Tiffany, she blurted out, the words rushing together. Your Nova, the one you fixed up with your grandpa before he passed. He said it was just sitting there, taking up space in the garage, and he needed the cash. He got a decent price for it, apparently. My breath hitched. The Nova. My beautiful, beat-up 1970 Chevrolet Nova. I'd spent countless hours with my grandpa, covered in grease, learning every bolt and wire, bringing that car back to life when I was 16. It was the last tangible piece of my childhood, the only thing I hadn't taken when I was kicked out, because I hadn't had anywhere to put it. I'd always imagined going back for it someday, restoring it fully, driving it proudly. It wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of my hard work, my connection to my grandpa, and the life I'd lost. He sold my car? I repeated, the words flat, devoid of emotion, even though inside, a cold fire had just ignited. To bail out Andre? Again? He said he had no choice, honey. Andre was looking at serious jail time. He always has a choice, Aunt Eloise, I said, my voice dangerously low. Mila, sensing the shift in my demeanor, looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed. He chose Andre. Again. Aunt Eloise started to apologize, but I cut her off. It's fine. Thanks for telling me. I hung up before she could say anything else. Mila sat up, her eyes wide. What happened? You look like you just saw a ghost and then decided to haunt it. I explained, my voice calm, almost detached, about the Nova, about Andre's latest arrest, about Dad selling the car. Mila's jaw dropped. He sold your car? The one you practically rebuilt with your bare hands? To bail out that parasitic brother of yours? That's a new low, even for them. She shook her head. Dude, Don't even go back there. Let them rot in their own mess. You're doing great. You don't need that toxic family in your life. She was right, of course. For 7 years, I'd built a life free of their drama, their lies, their betrayals. I was independent, successful. I didn't need their validation, or their apologies, or their presence. But as I looked around my quiet, comfortable condo, a place I'd earned with every ounce of my being, a different thought solidified in my mind. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could take everything, even the last physical connection to my past, and I would just disappear. A cold, hard smile touched my lips. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. I'm going back. Mila stared at me, then a slow grin spread across her face. Oh, this is going to be good. What's the plan, Tiff? If they want to pretend I don't exist, fine. But at Grandma's funeral, they're gonna remember my name. The news of Grandma Violet's death came 2 days after Aunt Eloise called about the Nova. It wasn't a shock, not really. Grandma had been frail for years, her mind sharp but her body failing. She was the only one who had truly believed me that day, the only one who had called me, heartbroken, after I left. My father had forbidden her from seeing me, but she'd still sent me letters, little notes of encouragement, until she was too weak to write. She was the anchor I didn't realize I still had, even from a distance. And now she was gone. The Lewis family group chat, a digital space I'd never been part of, exploded. Mila, ever the resourceful one, had managed to get me added. Aunt Eloise, bless her quiet heart, had sent Mila the link, feigning a tech issue and asking Mila to help her get all the family updates. Mila, with a mischievous glint in her eye, had used that as an excuse to add my number, labeling it Eloise's backup phone. Nobody questioned it. They were too busy arguing about funeral arrangements. I watched the messages scroll by on my phone, a silent observer in the digital chaos. Martin, my father, was doing his usual thing, delegating everything, sounding stressed but mostly concerned with appearances. Andre, out on bail and probably still high, was chiming in with performative grief, making sure everyone knew how much he loved Grandma, while also complaining about the cost of everything. My absence was a given. No one mentioned my name. No one asked if I was coming. It was as if I'd never existed. "They're acting like you're a ghost," Mila observed, leaning over my shoulder as I scrolled through a particularly saccharine message from Andre about Grandma's legacy. "Good," I said, my voice flat. Ghosts are quiet until they decide to haunt. The funeral was set for a Saturday, a week and a half away. Plenty of time to plan. I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to make an entrance. I pulled up a car rental app on my tablet. "What are you looking at?" Mila asked, munching on a piece of toast. "Something that screams, 'I'm doing just fine, thanks for asking,'" I replied, tapping through options. My eyes landed on a sleek black Tesla Model X. It wasn't flashy in an obnoxious way, but it was undeniably expensive, modern, and screamed quiet success. It was the opposite of the beat-up Nova they'd sold. This one, Mila whistled. Nice. "You gonna roll up like a CEO?" "Something like that," I said, confirming the booking. The cost was negligible to me now. It was an investment in a message. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a video call from Aunt Eloise. I answered, and her face, lined with a gentle sadness, filled the screen. "Tiffany, honey," she began, her voice soft. "I know things are complicated, but I wanted to give you something Grandma wanted you to have." She held up a small velvet pouch. With trembling fingers, she pulled out a strand of pearls. They weren't perfectly round, some were slightly irregular, but they had a deep, creamy luster that spoke of age and quiet elegance. I remembered them. Grandma Violet wore them to every special occasion. They were her signature. She always meant that for you, Aunt Eloise said, her eyes welling up. She told me years ago, if anything happened to her, these were for you. She said you had a strength in you, a quiet fire that reminded her of herself. She said you'd need them more than anyone. My throat tightened. A lump formed in my chest. Grandma, even after all these years, even after my father had cut me off, she had remembered me. She had believed in me. The pearls felt like a warm embrace from the only person who had ever truly seen me. Thank you, Aunt Eloise, I managed, my voice a little rough. That means everything. She loved you, Tiffany. Always, Aunt Eloise's voice broke. She never stopped believing you. After the call, I held the phone, staring at the screen, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness for Grandma, not entirely. It was a tear of gratitude and a tear of cold, hard resolve. These pearls weren't just a gift. They were a testament. They were a reminder of who I was and who they had tried to make me forget. I looked at Mila, who was watching me with an unreadable expression. They think they won, I said, my voice steady now, the last vestiges of emotion hardening into steel. They think they got away with it. They think I'm still that scared, broken kid they kicked out. I ran my thumb over the screen of my phone, where the family chat was still buzzing with trivial details about flower arrangements. I don't need their forgiveness, I stated, the words a quiet vow. I just need them to choke. The day of Grandma Violet's funeral dawned crisp and clear, a deceptively peaceful autumn morning. I'd driven the Tesla Model X from my condo, a 6-hour drive that gave me plenty of time to mentally prepare. I wasn't nervous, not exactly, more like a coiled spring, taut with anticipation. Mila had wished me good luck, a mischievous glint in her eye, and told me to make it count. I pulled the sleek black Tesla into the funeral home parking lot, a few spaces away from a cluster of familiar older sedans. The building was a traditional brick structure, quiet and somber. I took a deep breath, adjusted the elegant black dress I'd chosen, simple yet undeniably expensive, and reached for the pearls. Grandma's pearls. They felt cool against my skin, a comforting weight around my neck. They were my armor. Stepping out of the car, I felt every eye in the small gathering outside the funeral home turn towards me. It was a small family, mostly my father's side and a few distant cousins. They were all dressed in various shades of black and gray, looking tired and mournful. My father, Martin, now 52, stood near the entrance, his shoulders slumped. He looked older than I remembered, his hair thinner, more gray. Andre, 28, was beside him, looking surprisingly pale and fidgety, a stark contrast to his usual swagger. He was wearing a suit that looked a size too small, and he kept running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He looked more like a restless shadow. His fiancée, Yasmin, a pretty woman I'd only seen in pictures, stood a little apart from him, her expression a mix of concern and something else I couldn't quite decipher. Aunt Eloise was the first to spot me. Her eyes widened, then softened, and she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. Then Andre saw me. His eyes, usually so full of a self-assured glint, widened in shock. His jaw dropped slightly. He nudged Dad, who turned, his gaze sweeping over the Tesla, then settling on me. For a moment, his face was blank, then a flicker of something. Surprise? Shame? Crossed his features. He didn't say anything, just stared. I walked towards them, my steps even, my head held high. The pearls gleamed softly against my dress. I didn't rush. I wanted them to see me, really see me, not the broken, discarded girl they'd left behind. As I drew closer, Andre finally found his voice, a low, almost disbelieving whisper. You came? I met his gaze, my expression cool. Of course, it's Grandma's funeral. My voice was steady, calm. I didn't offer a hug, didn't even acknowledge my father directly. I just stood there, radiating a quiet confidence that seemed to make them shrink. Martin shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting away. He mumbled something about God's will and finding peace, the usual platitudes he resorted to when he couldn't face reality. He still couldn't look me in the eye. That familiar shame, that inability to confront his own choices, was still there, just as it had been 7 years ago. Andre, however, seemed to recover his composure slightly, though his eyes still held a nervous glint. He started talking to Yasmin in hushed tones, gesturing subtly towards me. I caught snippets of their conversation as they moved a little further away, but not far enough. "I can't believe she's here," Andre muttered, his voice low and urgent. "After all this time, what does she want?" Yasmin looked at him, confused. "Who is that, Andre? She looks familiar." "That's Tiffany," he hissed, his voice tight with barely concealed panic. "My sister, the one I told you about, the one who ruined everything back then." My lips twitched. Ruined everything? He was still spinning that lie, even to his fiancée. The audacity was almost impressive. "She just showed up out of nowhere?" Yasmin asked, her voice laced with concern. "Yeah," Andre said, looking over his shoulder at me, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "And I think she's finally come back to get even." I couldn't help it. A cold smile spread across my face. He was right. Finally, something we agreed on. The funeral service was a blur of hushed whispers and solemn hymns. I sat in the back row, a quiet observer, my presence a palpable tension in the room. Martin avoided my gaze, focusing intently on the program. Andre kept glancing over his shoulder, his face a mask of discomfort. Yasmin, however, seemed curious, her eyes occasionally flicking towards me, a question in their depths. When the time came for eulogies, a few distant relatives spoke, sharing generic pleasantries about Grandma Violet's kindness and resilience. Then, the funeral director announced, "And now, Grandma Violet's granddaughter, Tiffany Lewis, will share a few words." A collective gasp rippled through the small congregation. Martin's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. Andre actually flinched, a visible tremor running through him. I rose gracefully, the pearls shimmering faintly as I moved. I walked to the podium, my steps slow and deliberate, my gaze sweeping over the faces, lingering for a fraction of a second on my father and brother. Their expressions were a mixture of shock and dawning apprehension. I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone slightly, and took a moment to compose myself. My voice, when it came, was soft, clear, and carried easily through the quiet room. "Grandma Violet was a woman of incredible strength," I began, my gaze fixed on the framed photo of Grandma on the altar, her smile warm and genuine. "She taught me so much. She taught me that true strength isn't about how loudly you speak, but how firmly you stand. She taught me that even when the world tries to break you, you can rebuild yourself, piece by piece, stronger than before." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I could feel their eyes on me. I didn't look at anyone directly, but I knew who was listening. "She taught me that betrayal, while painful, can also be a catalyst," I continued, my voice gaining a quiet intensity. "It can force you to find a resilience you never knew you possessed. It can teach you to trust your own judgment, even when others refuse to believe you." I saw Martin shift in his seat, his face paling. Andre was rigid, his eyes fixed on me, a flicker of something akin to fear in their depths. "Grandma Violet understood that some wounds heal and some leave scars," I went on, my voice still gentle, almost reflective. "But those scars aren't weaknesses. They are maps of where you've been, and reminders of how far you've come. She taught me that even when you lose everything, You can still find your way back to yourself and build something new, something beautiful, something entirely your own. My words were carefully chosen, devoid of anger or direct accusation. But the subtext was a screaming siren. Every eye in the room, especially those of my family, knew exactly what I was talking about. The air grew thick with unspoken truths. She taught me the importance of self-worth, of knowing who you are, even when others try to define you by their own mistakes or their own lies, I said, my gaze finally sweeping over Andre and Martin, holding their eyes for a brief, pointed moment. She taught me that true family isn't just about blood, but about belief. About unwavering support, even when it's inconvenient. As I spoke, Andre's fidgeting intensified. He looked around as if searching for an escape. His face was flushed, his eyes darting frantically. Mid-sentence, just as I was about to transition to my closing remarks, he abruptly stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, a jarring sound in the solemn silence. Without a word, he turned and practically bolted from the room, disappearing through a side door. A few heads turned, but I didn't falter. I didn't even acknowledge his exit. My gaze remained steady, my voice unwavering. Grandma Violet lived a life of quiet dignity, and she taught me to do the same. I concluded, my voice soft but firm. She taught me to survive and to know who I am, even when others don't. I stepped back from the podium, the silence in the room deafening. I walked slowly back to my seat, the pearls a cool weight around my neck, a silent testament to the woman who had truly loved me. I sat down, my posture straight, my expression serene. The service continued, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. The air was heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of years of betrayal and denial. Martin, who had been staring at the door Andre had exited through, finally turned his head. His eyes, clouded with a mixture of confusion, shame, and a dawning realization, found mine. "Tiffany, wait," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but clear enough in the quiet room. The service concluded, and people slowly began to filter out, offering condolences to my father and a few other family members. I remained in my seat, watching the quiet exodus. Martin approached me, his movements stiff, his face etched with something I hadn't seen in years: discomfort. "Tiffany," he said again, his voice a little stronger this time but still hesitant. "Can we talk?" I rose, turning to face him fully. My expression was calm, unreadable. "There's nothing to talk about, Dad." He wrung his hands, a nervous habit I remembered from my childhood. "Your eulogy, it was very moving, and I know you're still upset about what happened, about the money and the car." He finally met my gaze, his eyes pleading. "I truly thought I was doing what was right for the family, protecting Andre. He was in such a bad place." I felt a cold laugh bubble up inside me, but I suppressed it. Right for the family? My voice was low, cutting through the lingering quiet of the funeral home. "You chose to believe a lie, Dad. You chose to kick out your 17-year-old daughter, who had a full-ride scholarship, based on a flimsy accusation from a brother who was already neck-deep in gambling debt. You chose to sacrifice my future for his immediate convenience. And then, 7 years later, you chose to sell the last thing I had left, the car I built with Grandpa, to bail out the same son who framed me. Again." He flinched, his face paling further. I didn't know what else to do. He's my son, Tiffany. I had to help him." "You made your choice, Dad," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. "Twice. And look where it got you." "And where it got him." I gestured subtly towards the door Andre had exited through. "He's still making the same mistakes, and you're still enabling him. That's not doing what's right for the family. That's just perpetuating a cycle." Just then, Aunt Eloise approached, her arm linked with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. He looked to be in his early 30s. "Martin," Aunt Eloise said, her voice firm, stepping between us slightly. "Tiffany is right. You made your choices. She's not that little girl anymore." She turned to me, a proud smile on her face. "Your eulogy was beautiful, honey. Grandma would have been so proud." "Thank you, Aunt Eloise," I said, a genuine warmth entering my voice for the first time. Martin looked from me to Eloise, then back again, his mouth opening and closing. He seemed utterly speechless, confronted by a united front he hadn't anticipated. "She's built a wonderful life for herself, Martin," Eloise continued, her voice clear. "She owns her own condo. She runs her own successful business. She even bought her own car, a very nice one, I might add, all on her own, without any help from you." Martin's eyes widened. He stared at me, then at the pearls around my neck, then back at my face, as if seeing me for the first time. The shock on his face was almost comical. He had clearly imagined me struggling, perhaps even failing, after he'd cast me out. The reality of my success, delivered so calmly and directly, seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He didn't have a single word in response. Just as the silence stretched, the man with Aunt Eloise stepped forward. "Tiffany? I'm Finn. Finn Dunn. I'm Yasmin's brother-in-law. Andre's brother-in-law, I guess, though I'm not sure for how much longer." He offered a small, knowing smile. He was 30, 6 years older than me, and his eyes held a weariness that suggested he'd seen a lot of Andre's nonsense. I shook his hand, surprised by his directness. "Nice to meet you, Finn." He glanced at Martin, who was still looking shell-shocked, then leaned in closer to me, lowering his voice. "Look, I heard a bit of your eulogy, and what you just said to your dad. You're right. He's still lying to everyone, and I think he's in deeper trouble than you know." My eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh?" Finn nodded, his expression serious. "Andre's not just in trouble with the law, he's been bleeding Yasmin dry. And her family's business. He's been embezzling from their accounts, using their credit cards, forging signatures. He's been doing it for months, maybe longer. Yasmin's family is about to find out, if they haven't already. They're not as forgiving as your dad." My heart gave a small, cold thump. This was more than just gambling debts and drug possession. This was serious fraud. Andre hadn't just framed me. He was a serial deceiver, escalating his crimes. "He's still lying to them about the extent of his gambling, too," Finn added, his voice grim. "He's told Yasmin he's clean, but I've seen him placing bets on his phone. He's got them convinced he's just a victim of circumstance. But he's a black hole, Tiffany. He just takes and takes." Finn pulled out his phone, quickly scrolling through something. "I've been keeping an eye on him for Yasmin's sake. I don't want her to get completely ruined. I've got some receipts, screenshots of bank transfers, text messages where he's admitting to things, even some photos of him at the casino when he was supposed to be at work. I think Yasmin's family needs to see this. They're too close to him to see it clearly." He turned the phone to me, showing me a series of images, bank statements showing large unauthorized transfers, text messages discussing large sums of money and how to hide them, photos of Andre at a casino poker table, looking far too comfortable. My eyes scanned the evidence, a cold satisfaction settling deep in my gut. This wasn't just about my car anymore. This was about justice. Poetic, undeniable justice. "He's been embezzling from his own fiancé's family business," I murmured, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, yet also like victory. The funeral reception was held at a nearby community hall, a place bustling with polite chatter and the clinking of teacups. I stayed for a short while, accepting quiet condolences, occasionally catching Martin's uneasy glances. Andre was nowhere to be seen, likely still hiding after his dramatic exit. Yasmin was there, looking pale and preoccupied, occasionally talking to Finn. I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone. Finn had sent me all the receipts he'd collected, screenshots of bank statements, text message exchanges, and those damning photos of Andre at the casino. It was a meticulous collection, clearly gathered over time. Finn had done his homework. My initial thought was to just send it all to Yasmin, but that felt too direct, too much like a personal attack. This wasn't about destroying Andre for my own satisfaction, not directly. It was about letting his own actions catch up to him. It was about karma. I created a burner email address, something untraceable, and carefully compiled all the evidence. I wrote a short, anonymous message, simple and to the point. Concerned party. This information may be relevant to Yasmin and her family regarding Andre Lewis's financial activities. Please review carefully. I attached the files and sent it to Yasmin's work email, which I'd found with a quick search, and also to the general contact email for her family's business. They were a reputable, long-standing local company. They'd have their own legal team. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't even check my burner email again. My part was done. I left the reception shortly after, the quiet hum of the Tesla a comforting sound as I drove away. The next few days were quiet. I returned to my condo, to Mila, and to the familiar rhythm of my business. I didn't mention the email to Mila, not yet. I just waited. Then, 3 days after the funeral, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Eloise. It was short, almost frantic. Andre rearrested. Serious new charges. Embezzlement. Fraud. Yasmin's family. It's bad, Tiffany. Very bad. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. Not for the first time, I was grateful for Aunt Eloise's quiet presence in the family, her willingness to share information. A few hours later, Mila texted me, her usual bubbly emojis replaced by a single, wide-eyed one. OMG, did you see the news? Andre Lewis arrested again. For fraud. Yasmin's family business. Their wedding is off. I typed back, my fingers flying over the keyboard. That was poetic. Mila's reply came instantly, accompanied by a string of laughing emojis. Too bad they didn't read the fine print. I set my phone down, a profound sense of clarity washing over me. There was no joy, no triumphant cackle, just a quiet, deep satisfaction. This wasn't revenge in the traditional sense, not a direct act of destruction. It was the universe course-correcting. It was Andre's own choices, his own lies, finally catching up to him in a way that couldn't be denied or covered up. My father wouldn't be able to bail him out of this one. Not with his own money, and certainly not with mine. The Lewis family chat, which I was still silently observing, was an absolute meltdown. Martin was posting frantic, rambling messages about false accusations and Andre's good heart. Other family members were expressing shock, disbelief, and thinly veiled judgment. Yasmin, who had been a quiet presence in the chat before, had left the group. Her family, I imagined, was busy dealing with the legal fallout. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was Martin. I stared at the caller ID for a long moment, the name a stark reminder of everything. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Finally, it stopped. A minute later, a text message came through. From Martin. Tiffany, please, I need to talk to you. I want to fix things. I need to understand. I read the message, then slowly, deliberately, typed my reply. I think it's your turn to survive this. Driving home from the funeral, the hum of the Tesla was a quiet counterpoint to the rush of thoughts in my head. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way a movie character might after a grand act of revenge. There was no wild exhilaration, just a deep, abiding sense of calm, a quiet knowing that the scales, finally, were tipping back into balance. I didn't reply to Martin's text. I didn't block his number either. I simply let his message sit there, unread, a testament to his belated and self-serving attempt at reconciliation. He wanted to fix things now that his golden boy was facing real consequences, now that his carefully constructed denial was crumbling. But it was too late. The choices had been made, the damage done. My survival wasn't his responsibility, and my healing wasn't his to orchestrate. As I drove, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Aunt Eloise. I answered, putting her on speaker. "Tiffany, honey," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Are you home safe?" "Almost, Aunt Eloise. Everything's fine. I wanted to say again how proud I am of you, and how sorry I am for everything. For not doing more back then." "You did what you could, Aunt Eloise," I said, a genuine warmth in my voice. "You believed me. That was enough." "It wasn't enough for you to lose everything," she murmured. "But you didn't, did you? You built it all back. And more." We talked for a few more minutes, a quiet conversation that felt like a bridge finally being rebuilt. She told me Andre was being held without bail, that Yasmin's family was pursuing charges aggressively, and that Martin was a wreck. I listened, but the information didn't stir the old bitterness. It was simply news. The consequences of actions, playing out as they should. Before we hung up, Aunt Eloise said, "Oh, Aunt Tiffany, I almost forgot. Grandma Violet's lawyer called me. He said there's a letter for you. Something from her will. It's being mailed out this week." My heart gave a little flutter. Grandma. Even in death, she was still looking out for me. I pulled into my condo complex, parked the Tesla in my designated spot, and walked up to my door. Mila was already asleep, the apartment quiet. I changed into comfortable clothes and sat on my couch, staring out the window at the city lights. The emotional scars from that day 7 years ago would always be a part of me. The betrayal, the feeling of being abandoned, the struggle to build a new life from scratch, those experiences had shaped me. They had made me wary, fiercely independent, and unwilling to tolerate dishonesty. But they hadn't broken me. They had forged me. The next morning, the mail arrived. Among the usual bills and junk mail, there was a thick, cream-colored envelope with a law firm's letterhead. Grandma Violet's will. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. There was a formal letter from the lawyer, outlining the bequests. Most of Grandma's modest estate had been left to various charities, and a small trust for Andre's future children, should he ever have any, and get his life together. But then, I saw my name. "To my beloved granddaughter, Tiffany Lewis," the letter read, in Grandma's familiar, slightly shaky handwriting, transcribed by the lawyer. "I leave you the small parcel of land behind the old family farm. It's not much, dear one, just 5 acres of overgrown woods and a small clearing. But it's yours. A place where you can always find peace, and a reminder that some things, once taken, can be reclaimed, and some things, once lost, can be found again, or built anew. You are stronger than they know, baby. Always remember that. A piece of land. Not a house, not a fortune, but a physical patch of earth. Something tangible, something real, something that was undeniably, legally mine, a place to build, or simply to be. A quiet, powerful affirmation from the only person who had truly seen me. I smiled, a genuine, soft smile that reached my eyes. It wasn't about the value of the land. It was about the gesture. It was about the belief. It was about the knowing. Nothing they stole was worth more than what I built.